Hello, and thank you for joining our Reimagine Talent webinar, Optimizing Talent Acquisition and Managing in Turbulent Times, brought to you by People Science. If this is your first time joining us or you aren't familiar with us yet, People Science provides talent acquisition advisory services, recruitment process partnering, recruitment placement services, and we have a new proprietary software, HireGate, which is an HR technology that actually augments your ATS to provide recruitment data and AI-driven insights. Encourage you to visit us at our newly updated website, www.peoplescience.com, to learn more and reach out. We have a great knowledge library. You can see all of our past webinars, case studies, white papers. And if you'd like, you can also reach out to us and schedule a complimentary strategy session at any time through our website. If you're attending, obviously, and registered for the webinar, we will send you a follow-up email with those links so you can easily get to those. My name is Jessica Oberto. I'm the Director of Process and Implementation at People Science, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. You'll find that these webinars are more conversational between our panel of guests. So at any point during today's conversation, if you'd like to add something or ask a question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to make sure that we get back to you. So now let's introduce our panel of speakers. As always, our webinar presenter is Christine Nicholas, a visionary in talent acquisition and a widely respected thought leader on all aspects of recruiting. Christine is the founder and CEO of People Science and HireGate. After leaving a corporate position with the staffing industry as a leader, she founded People Science to help companies solve their toughest hiring challenges and really transform how they acquire the talent they need today and in the future. For nearly 2 decades, Christine's led the development of cutting-edge information systems, processes, and methodologies at People Science. She has also developed the recruiting continuum methodology, which is the cornerstone of People Science's success. And on to our special guests for today's discussion. First, we have Danelle DiLibero, VP of People Operations at Augury. As an experienced people and culture executive, Danelle drives optimization of business operations to recruit and retain a high-performing, global, and diverse workforce equipped to carry out a company's mission. Danelle is committed to safeguarding the health and well-being of her workforce. As a member of multiple advisory boards, Danelle has cultivated relationships as trusted advisor to founders, CEOs, and boards of directors on talent acquisition and engagement strategy. Welcome, Danelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Next, we have Lorna Hagen, Human Capital Executive at Culture Playbook Partners. Lorna has over 20 years of experience focused on building high-performance teams. During her career, she has led employee communications during major cultural milestones, among them the 2008 financial collapse, the 2020 election, the onset of the COVID pandemic, and the overturning of Roe versus Wade. As a CHRO, she has led major digital transformations, turnarounds, and the high growth of several venture-backed unicorns. Her passion lies at the intersection of business growth, executive development, and company engagement. So welcome, both of you. We're so happy to have you joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christine.
Hello, everybody. Hello, audience. Good morning on the East. We're at noon. Okay, so happy lunch. And good morning on the West Coast. Glad that you're joining us. We love this community, getting a lot of good feedback, getting a lot of good information. And today, these are 2 rock stars in my world. I've known Lorna and I've known Danelle for a really long time. And when we wanted to look at this topic, the volatile state that we're in, our country divided, our companies divided, these were the 2 people that came to mind, because I know I've been with them on many occasions as we've gone through some trials and tribulations. And we were even talking about the aftermath of 9/11. Both Lorna and Danelle have worked in the New York area for a very long time. They're very familiar with working in an intense environment and a lot of other things. So we're going to get to that soon. First, the numbers. Jess, do you want to pull those up for us? You know, I just want to really make it clear that I'm hearing a lot, especially on the social sites, particularly TikTok, and some on Reels, about the unemployment rate from recruiters. Look, if you're unemployed, it just doesn't feel good, period. And nobody wants to see a number that doesn't reflect high unemployment in their sector. You just don't. And I think in Talent Act, it's even harder because this is our world, right? And I think in the upcoming months, you'll see that we're going to start to do reach out specifically to the unemployed in the talent acquisition space, and maybe do a monthly catch up with everybody. But in fact, the unemployment rate did go up to 4%. It's been a while since it's been at 4%. Whether or not we see that increase too much, much more in the upcoming month will be interesting. I personally don't suspect we're going to see it go too much higher. And there's a lot of reasons for that unemployment number. One of the things that we will cover, not today, but I will do a TikTok specifically about how you can find what the actual percentage rate is closer to your specific job on the Bureau of Labor Statistics that might give you a little bit more information. So at 4% for last month, moving ahead. So job openings, this comes from the JOLTS report, not too much of a change, but you can see us dipping down just a bit. Really, is it, really that much of a number? Not too bad. So this is the information that the government gathers by survey and also by observation of how companies are adding jobs. One of the things that I'm investigating is how are they determining these numbers? Because in this day and age with technology, where it is, are they really scraping boards? How are they looking at websites? And it's something I'm digging into. If anybody else has an interest there, just message me because I'd love to talk to you about that. Or if you have insights about it, that'd be great. I thought it'd be interesting too to look at going back to April 2019. The number there was 7272. So still a good distance away from where we are now. But I think that's the number that I've kind of been watching. What are we looking at going back pre-pandemic? So again, jobs added. Next one, Jess. And the national employment added or lost. This was that 272,000. This is what I think really threw media into a frenzy and really had an effect on the Fed's decisions moving forward, because this is a big number to look at. This is the after effect, right? So if we're looking during the month of May, we actually saw a significant increase in the jobs added as compared to April. Look at this up down spiral though. It's kind of interesting. Still not a low number. And I think some of the confusion that you're feeling, that I'm hearing about, and the confusion that's out there is because it is a confusing time. We've got to start to negate what we knew before and reimagine how we decide what's going on in the employment economy. So thanks for being here, because that's really our whole objective. Right. So the topic that we like to talk about AI once a month. We like to talk about what we're hearing in diversity. We actually are combining these two. And if you were I think it was November, right, Jess? September or
Yes.
October, November, we did a webinar for HR.com that talked about the ecosystem in AI. So the talent acquisition ecosystem and how AI relates to it. I thought this was a good time to bring this up, but one of the we were citing some studies from a group out of Stanford that was actually publicized on ABC, and this is one of the things that they asked AI. So combining diversity with AI, let's take a look. So they asked AI to show them professional chefs, and you can see it's a white male in a chef outfit, and then fast food workers. I think this is so indicative of the fact that, and you hear a lot about this right now, right? There's a lot of some noise, but a lot of fact out there about the way AI is just reflecting who we are. It's saying, this is what I'm seeing. It scans the whole internet and it says, this is what a professional chef looks like. So I think when we look at AI from a diversity standpoint, we want to look at it from, what can I learn from this? What is this telling me? Can we run AI on our own internal company and see, or even on our talent acquisition strategies or our overall growth strategies, and see what it tells us? Will it reflect these kind of things? So an interesting idea. I know it's something I'm talking to our IT department about, something you might want to take a look at too. Want to uncover your biases? AI can do it for you. And just to back that one up, and this is the one that kind of hurt the most for me. So this is what it said: show us a good leader, show us a bad leader, and show us a follower. The 4 women on here. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but apparently we're the followers. Interesting though. Again, a good idea, run some AI through your internal and see how it pops up. It's different, I think, and you guys are welcome to chime in on this. When I look at numbers, right, it looks different than even looking at this made up AI persona. but it still puts it into a different perspective. And I think if you're trying to socialize with your CEO or upper suite about what things really look like, that AI can help you do that. Lorna, I know you've worked with so many different CEOs. What do you think about that? Do you think a visual would help them more?
So I've always been a big fan of visuals. I think I believe in the old adage that a picture can tell 1,000 words, and it's frankly the way to better comms, right? In this day and age, people are looking for bite-sized, impactful, and I would add visual ways of storytelling. And I think we'll get a little bit into that today.
Yeah, and I think it's as simple too, by the way. If you pull like GPT for me anyway, does not necessarily show a visual, but there's a lot of inexpensive AI tools that if you just take your company numbers and plow them into there, it'll very quickly give you this type of result.
Yeah.
So love to hear comments on how that goes. Anything, Jess, anything, Danielle, to comment about that?
I just think it's important that, you said put the numbers into the tool. It's just so important that you have the numbers, right? So while the picture tells 1,000 words, if you don't have the data to back it up, at that point, it's just storytelling, right? We want to make sure that the data is there to back up, the message that you're giving, and also, the hope that you can bring along people for that journey through the data and the storytelling and the images that go with it.
I love that. So yeah, you've got to make sure you have the data, but the operative words for me and what you just said were take along. Mm-hmm. So this is a discovery process, and inviting them into the discovery process, that can only help with engagement. Great thought. Right? Danielle, you're like, did I get?
I think Lorna and I share the same feeling on this, and Lorna, not to speak for you, but you and I've talked, for those who don't know, Lorna and I have actually had the opportunity to work together as well. So I don't know if, even though Christine said she's worked with me and she's worked with Lorna and I have actually worked together. So this is really a great panel for us, because I think there's so many different things that we could bring to this, shared experience as well as unique experiences. But one of the things that we've talked about in the past, and I think comes up quite a bit, is in your role as a leader in the HR space, whether it's talent acquisition, as a CHRO, the head of L&D, whatever your role is. We keep hearing more and more that HR has a seat at the table, and that is mostly true for most, I think, fortunate, HR professionals. There are some who are still struggling to get to that place. But the point is that when you are part of that group, you're part of it, right? You're not there as the support system. You're there to go along with and to bring the team along, just as they're bringing you along. You're part of the overall strategy of the organization. And you have to make sure that as you bring ideas forward, or you bring data forward, or you bring suggestions into play, it is part of the relationship that you have with your CEO, with the rest of the leadership team, and that there's buy-in. And that you agree and commit, or you disagree and commit. But those things need to happen at the forefront before you just go off and start executing on an HR agenda.
And such a good segue into our conversation for today. There's one more thing that I wanted to touch on, and I know that we have people that have followed us month after month. When we talk about return to work, one of the key metrics that we've been looking at is what is really going on in commercial real estate. 2 weeks ago, there was a Bloomberg, 2 Fridays ago, I think it was, Bloomberg published some of the information about the concern about small banks, mid-sized banks, and even large banks. As we're looking at the commercial real estate maturities will rise to $922 billion in 2024, representing 20% of $4.7 trillion in outstanding loans. So banks are holding 47% of the maturing volume. The number of loans maturing this year has raised concerns about the default and risk and the potential for increase in distressed assets. Commercial real estate is going to hawk its wares for commercial real estate, right? But I think some of these numbers are a little frightening for I say larger banks. I talked to somebody who said, it's mostly the mid-market. The small banks, of course, will we see the feds get involved? What's going to happen coming towards the end of the year? But as far as human resources is concerned, I like to talk about these numbers because we, the people on this call, are the ones that can affect this. Right? This is employment, and this is what's going on in the employment world, and our voices matter. And I think some of the confusion that we have in the workplace is because we haven't had the kind of business acumen that we need in talent, in human resources in general, and in talent acquisition. So the more we talk, the more we learn, the more we have our own voice instead of being kind of negated to the press and the media and other business analysts' projection. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Danielle and Lorna today. And I'm so glad that everybody keeps following us. Let's help make the difference with our employees' voices. So on to that, our topic for today is about the country's divided. We're coming up on an election. We may even do a recap of this before the election. And there's so many volatile areas around the world. I know, Danielle, I'd like to really start with you talking a little bit about what it's like to have an Israeli presence when Israeli is under, in such a volatile state right now, and kind of take it from there, talking about, and what we'll do is talk about where we are now and really things that have worked in the past coming out of crises with people divided. So Danielle, you want to lead us off? How's that going? How's everything going for you in the Middle East?
It's difficult, and I think I should start by saying that in the highest level of that term, how difficult it is. We have, as Christine said, a good portion of our workforce, if not more than half, is in Israel right now. We do have a large presence in an office, a physical office, and what becomes part of our day-to-day is that this is its own presence, right? The war in a country is its own presence that goes on a day-to-day in our office. And so it is something that individuals, are dealing with. It is something our business is dealing with. It is something the country and the state is dealing with. So when we, as a leadership team, we have to think of it in a few different aspects of it, but mostly we have to make sure that we don't go political, but we go very personal. And we start to really think about it in the terms of how do we take care of our people? How do we, to the best of our ability, ensure safety? And safety comes in a lot of different forms, right? It's physical safety, it's emotional safety, it's mental safety. It's there's just so many different ways that people look for safety. So how do we, in our best way possible, provide measures and tools and resources to our employees so that they feel like they are supported and safe? And then how do we, from a business standpoint, continue to run our business, knowing that this is impacting, and it doesn't just impact one site. I want to be so clear that what happens in one location isn't just to that location, right? It impacts an entire organization. It is the empathy from, one person to another. It is the ability to support a group when they're going through an unknown time or a turbulent time or a crisis. It's again, how do we continue to be there for each other on a personal level, on a business level? And then, you think about the types of resources we can offer. One size doesn't fit all. You can't just offer one thing and hope everybody utilizes it and everybody will be better. You have to offer a lot of different types of resources, whether it is, someone having access to an employee assistance program or an on-site therapist or someone they could speak to. It's the ability to have access to benefits immediately on hand should something be needed, the ability to take time off if that's available and the team needs that. We have a lot of different buckets when you have a crisis going on. And again, right now, the crisis specifically for my organization is we have our employees in a country at war. But I think that there are lots of different crises that are going on, right? There's other wars happening around the world as well, with Ukraine and Russia. There's other different, you just talked about the economic crisis, right? There's different crises going on. And so for us, we really talk about how does it impact the employee that is personally going through something? So specifically, with my teams in Israel, we have employees who will be called to reserve duty. So how do we support them? How do we support employees who, may have a family member who has been called to go and, a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, a family member? How do we support the family when someone is out on reserve? So, we don't want to forget the family. So how do we take care of the rest of the family when maybe our employee isn't available to them? They're still part of, our ecosystem in our community. How do we support the employees who are just coming to the office every day, right? Just because they're not necessarily being called to reserve duty doesn't mean this isn't weighing heavily on them. And then, of course, we have the rest of our organization who is also going through this as partners, as friends, as colleagues, and need to be, supportive and empathetic. So there's no playbook. If I may say, I hope there's never a playbook on how to, do HR during a war like that. I would hope that we don't ever have to get to the point where there's a playbook for that. But there's a few things that I think we need to be mindful of. And in any crisis, right? One is you have to start to offer resources to your employees because they may not know what they need until they get it. So being available to just start offering things is important. And then listening is important because, it may not be working, or now that you've triggered a thought, they realize they need something different, or they need something more, or they need something less, and being mindful. So I do believe we've done as much as we can with good intention. And what we have to do then is be very thoughtful and open to the feedback we're hearing to say, I know you had a good intention. That doesn't work for me. This does instead, and being able to pivot and making sure that we're being responsive as well.
So
I
no
really, sorry, I was going to say, I really like that, Danielle. And I think one of the most important things in there, it's a lot, but one of the things that I would call out is not all employees. Sorry, let me rephrase. Don't feel the need to provide the same thing to everybody. People in different situations, in different locations, in different areas need different things. And so what I would encourage everyone to do is think about fairness and not equality, because not all turbulent times, not all chaos is created equal. And what a company can and should do, to the point of let's hope there's never a playbook for something, is going to have to pivot. And for us that are managing the culture aspect and the people aspect of an organization, like, how do you have a really solid understanding of how to communicate and how to action? And, those are two things that I would absolutely say. Make sure that you know how to tell a story. Make sure that you know how to communicate. If you don't, have someone that does know how to do that, and then have a bend towards action. Don't wait for employees to tell you what to do. That's probably one of the worst things that we can do when we're trying to manage our workforces through chaos.
Yeah. And I think, Lorna, you're right about the, communicating is so key. And I think sometimes leadership at many organizations are so concerned about making sure the message is right that there's a delay in getting a message out. And then there's this gap of time of unknown. And so I think there's this communicate without fear, right? There's the more senior you get, the more they tell you anything you write can show up on the front page of the newspaper. And so you write, every T is crossed and every comma is in the right place. You get very thoughtful about the way you write your communications in the time of a crisis, in the time of emergency, in a time where an immediate response is required. Typos are acceptable, right? It's as long as people should hear from you. They need to know what's going on. And it's important, I think, if as much as you can prepare for a crisis or a business continuity plan. So the playbook is really your business continuity playbook. And every company should have one of those. So I'm not saying there shouldn't be. What I don't want is there to be a playbook for a war. I'd like every company to be thinking, do we have a business continuity plan? Do we have a business continuity playbook? That you should have. That's table stakes. And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? There's what are our code of ethics? Different than our code of conduct of how we behave, but what are our code of ethics? Meaning, what will we support? What won't we support? What will we comment on? What won't we comment on? what will we change our logo for? What won't we change our logo for? What will we publicly recognize versus maybe internally only recognize? So companies should have those, and that's really based on the culture, their reputation, what they ultimately decide to do. Then you drill down a little further. Okay, when something happens, how do we communicate? Where should people go to find that communication? Are we communicating via email, via Slack, via text messaging, via WhatsApp, via an emergency call system? Where are people going to get their information? And because if you have multiple places, then someone's going to miss something. So does everybody in the company know, if you need to know information, if something happens, this is where you have to go to find out what to do next? And that could be something, and not to compare clearly what's going on in Israel to a day-to-day activity, but that's something as simple as, hey, look, our office is closing because it's snowing, and it's just, we don't want you to travel. It's dangerous on the roads. How do we make sure people know not to get on the road before we announce the closing? So how do we make sure
your more simplified continuity plans?
Mhm.
You can use those as your cookie cutter, because Lord knows there's enough going on. When I was searching about diversity, this is Pride Month, right?
Mhm.
And in that process, I came across a calendar for diversity, and every month there was no less than 6 types of diverse organizations, people shouting out, "This is our day." It was pretty amazing. Like things I never thought of. There are and that's just one example, but I know, what do you do when somebody's got an illness or a family member has an illness? Like how all of that is really part of the continuity plan. I guess there's an extremist level, right? Like years ago, we used to call it crisis management,
Mhm.
which fortunately I've never had to use except at a wedding. But 10 years of being certified in crisis management, because at one point there was a shooter in a building that I was in, and that was it. After that, we had to in our office.
ABC, right, Lorna? We did
But I totally, oh my God, I remember that. But what I would say is those are the few and far between cases, right? Like, I mean, in the 20 plus, I know I look much younger, years that I've been doing this, I've had to go to a police station once. I've had to stay up Friday night till midnight trying to find a lost employee. So those are just 2 super, super outliers. But when we're really talking about how do we help, again, you're kind of at the core of your culture, and how do you help manage through these times? And I love Danielle's point around comms and where you're actually communicating. I think this is a really important thing that so many companies miss, right? You would never launch a product without user input. And yet we throw communications out there to employees without asking them how they want it. And, I don't know if you guys have seen, if you don't follow Axios, you should, because they do some incredible stuff around communications. But, 36% of employees want messages in town halls and all hands. Like that's how they want information, the vast majority. And yet we as executives love to go to the intranet because we built it and it's exciting and I love it and I have to show the ROI on that investment. Employees don't want. A quarter of executives put stuff on there, 14% of employees are going there for information. So when you're thinking about how do I get this message across, you absolutely have to think about who is getting the message, why are they getting the message, and how do they want to get the message, and then go and craft whatever it is that you need to say. I think we get so twisted around the axle around the what, we always lose the how, and the how is where the impact really lives. So I think that's
how do you get
really
the how?
important.
I think that's probably one of the big, especially in larger organizations, right? How is that, and what is the involvement in between human resources and the upper management, and the worker is the hiring manager, what we would call the manager, right? So in the manager's position, can you talk to us, both of you talk to us about how do you keep them trained? How do you keep them updated? How do you gain their buy-in, right? And then how do you teach them to make it a safe environment for the employee to say, my dad's terminal, I need to leave early every Thursday? I mean, how do you do that? Like, how do you open those doors? Because I think what we're seeing is our employees are pushing for more transparency. And just piggybacking on what Lorna said, and I know on here many times we've talked about the Edelman Trust Barometer But in fact, last year's barometer showed that 68% of the population puts more trust in us, in their business leaders, than any other institution. Media is all the way down. It's the lowest on the list. Next to that is government. And then next to that is non-government entities. The World Trade or the UN. But certainly by a landslide, they are putting their trust in your CEO. And the expectation is that you will get behind my personal cause. So if I am about women's rights, I want to see you come out and talk about women's rights. So I think, how do we move from what has historically been an employer, an employer driven with all the power situation? So how do we take that and then translate that into tell me what's important for you, especially in a crisis situation or
So
one of
that's really interesting, Christine. There are two things there. One is this idea of like, how do we help managers be more human and empathetic? Like, to me, that answer is simple. Like, if you are not doubling down on investing in your middle managers on how to have the right leadership skills, then you're just going to fail, right? That's when you see increased churn, you see decreased engagement, all the things that make a company just kind of blah to work for, because you're not actually arming leaders, upcoming leaders, the next gen leaders, with the basic foundations of how to lead people and teams. Like, so I'm going to put that aside for a minute, because that could be happening in turbulent times and non-turbulent times. Like, that's price of entry for running a company. Invest in your people. If we're talking about this idea of, and let's go back to the what, in this case, topically, what makes sense for someone to talk about, you're going to have chaos, right? I worked at a big global news organization when the Arab Spring was happening. Our employees were there on the ground. Things were happening, right? We're going to talk about that. You have to. But then you brought up kind of gender roles or equality, inequality, all of those things. Well, there's an expectation, we think, that employees want our people to talk about that, but you don't know, right? So this goes back to, what do you know about your organization? In broad strokes, 25% of employees that were surveyed in this Axios report, they think that leaders should talk about those topics internally and externally. But 25% of employees don't want their leaders talking about anything. Just shut up and lead the organization. I come here to find community. I come here to find connection. I come here to do really good work and get my paycheck. Please stay out of the bigger conversation. And so people really need to know what employees want in order to make a decision about what to put out there internally or externally. And the numbers kind of are very, very true to each other. Employees aren't saying, hey, talk about the gender stuff internally, but stay quiet, out there. And so I think there's a really big opportunity for us in the people function to have better data around what employees want us to be talking about. Do you know if they want to talk about politics? The data that I see say they don't want you to talk about politics. But do you have a plan for what happens after a major election that's going to rock 50% of actually 100% of your employees one way or the other, divided in half, right? And what I can say there is, in the 2020 election, I think, Danielle, you and I were together back then, we didn't take a stance, but we took a stance on, we understand that our employees are deeply feeling one way or the other, and there was support for them, which was the same thing that we did after 9/11, right? In that case, we brought in external people we weren't grief counselors. We didn't know what to do. So we found external neutral partners to help our employees get through what was happening. Guess what? That's the right thing to do. But it also goes back to what Danielle said about business continuity. If you don't say anything and you don't address it, your business is going to suffer.
The other thing
I like
the
your
other thing
line
is-
too. I like that line too, that you used initially, Danielle, when you said not political,
it's personal.
but personal.
Yeah. And fact driven, right? So that's the other thing too. So as Lorna just brought up the 2020 election, I remember the communications out to our employees prior to the election was there are a record number of voters expected this year. Lines at the polls will be longer. We are giving extra time for people, especially if you have an hourly workforce. We gave extra time for people to have their right to vote and not worry and choose between, losing an hour of pay versus standing in the line an extra hour, and gave the opportunity. Again, we didn't say go vote for so-and-so. This is who we're supporting. We said from a personal perspective, you have this right to go do this. We don't want you to have to choose between that right and coming to work today. We want you to be able to exercise that. Here's what we can offer you. And here's some extra information to help support that, such as here's some links to local polling locations. Here's some links to when polls close, making sure you can adjust your time around that. Hey, managers, be mindful, talk to your teams leading up to the day of the election so you get a better understanding of where if someone has to leave early or come in late because of this. That becomes very personal to the individual. It also becomes very fact driven, and it could have been for any reason. That one just happened to be an election. So again, we stayed out of the politics of it and really focused on what our team members needed on that day to exercise what they needed, what they wanted to go do. And then you have the day after.
I really, Danielle, I think that's so important.
I mean, if we didn't learn anything from January 6th, we should have, right? And I think, Lorna, I didn't mean to cut you off there, give you, in just a second, but one of the things that you were talking about is you want to do what's important to your people and knowing that ahead of time. Because if we look at, let's look at what happened to Salesforce, right? 800 people walked off the job because they didn't want to have anything to do with creating software that supported the border. 25,000 people in one day walked off the job at Google because they were advocating for women's rights. Knowing these things ahead of time and being able to stop an issue before it becomes an issue. And I think that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation and understanding what is important to my team. If Salesforce understood that at the get-go, did they make the conscious decision to move ahead anyway? I mean, I would rather see that as an opportunity to truly understand what's important to my people and get in front of it without an opinion. Okay, that's what HR does, right? We tap dance around making everybody feel included and making everything right. So I'm not sure how to do it, but that's the perfect.
I got to counter that. I think what we try to do is provide a space for psychological safety. And that means something different for everybody. And we don't try to solve for all. I think we try to solve for most. And we have to do that while towing the line of what our business ethics are and what our business plan is and our business strategy is. There are, and I know everybody's tired of this topic, but there are companies who absolutely said, I'm glad you all want to work from home forever. Guess what? You're either back in the office 5 days or you're fired. And that company was very clear about who they are and who they wanted to be and what they followed as their culture. And you were either in or out. And so, again, I'm not taking a stance on either side of this, but the fact is you're not looking to solve for everyone in that situation. It is very much a balance between who you are as an organization and the people who work at the organization. I think what we continually try to find is a place for psychological safety for our employees.
Of course. But I do think
doesn't mean you're all going to be happy.
Different organizations have different kinds of employee bases and have a different stance on these important issues.
That's right.
Right.
I think that's really true. What I will say kind of from this end is, as a CHRO of large companies, smaller companies, which is at the end of the day, you're there for one thing, and it's business execution. And I've seen organizations that go so far to one side of providing comfort to employees. Back, Christine, to the point that you made about what do employees want from us, right? Because nobody goes to church and nobody goes to synagogue, nobody goes to the Rotaries anymore. So they're looking for their community at work. And I've seen organizations that go so far adrift in employee engagement and happy employees and employee experience that they forget the idea of you're there to build a business strategy and execute with clarity. And so those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think back to what Danielle is saying, listen, yeah, we have these jobs, but at the end of the day, no company, no jobs. And so like, how do we manage that with the right comms cadence? And to your point, like, we don't know what employees want to hear from us. And so I worked at one organization where the leadership, they put their politics front and center, and everybody was very clear on what they were. But that's an exception. For the most part, I've worked at organizations where we're not going to talk about that. Everyone has their own views. We're here to run a company, and we're going to do it in a way that really motivates our employees to do it. And we're going to be expert at communicating everything from what's happening in the world that's impacting us, from what's happening internally that's impacting us. So I think that idea of the more focused your strategy and the clearer your vision, employees will come with you, and for all sorts of times and turbulent times, because that's what we're talking about, but you have to keep them involved, right? And so I'll give you an example. When Roe versus Wade happened, it was at this one organization where everyone knew what the politics there were. But what they decided to do was get on the phone with our major benefits provider and ensure that every woman and dependent and anyone who needed contraception had contraception covered at 100%. And then we made an announcement about that. We didn't talk about the Supreme Court. We didn't talk about the former president. We didn't talk about any of those things. We said, this has happened in the world. This is our response to it.
But see, right there, that's the opportunity. That's where it is. Because people are looking, and by default, your work has always been your community. And it doesn't matter if you're remote or you're physically together, it's always been your community. And now employees are saying, we're choosing you as our favored as far as leadership is concerned. And I think that this is kind of like a silent opportunity that gets trampled on. This is where, when you think from a diversity standpoint, after you leave school, where do you meet the bulk of the people that you know? Last month we talked about 42% of people say that they met their spouse at work. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how critical the community, the work community is. Mm-hmm. So really seeing these as opportunities to, and especially when I think about the upcoming election, and I don't know about you, I don't like living in a country divided. I am pulling every stop that I have personally out to try and figure out the other viewpoint. And it's not easy. I mean, we can finger point forever. We can stonewall, we can blame, we can say it shouldn't be this or it shouldn't be that, but we are still the United States of America, unless the Republic of California leaves, right? Lauren, we were talking about the Republic of California, but we're not seeing any of that happen. And I think that it's our obligation as employers to understand the power that we hold to support everybody. And I'll get off.
I love that. And here's what I would say back to the point that you made about managers and my point about kind of price of entry, L&D, which is there should be a module in your learning programs teaching leaders to debate and have civil discourse in your organization. If you don't have that, you're missing the boat.
So Culture Partners needs to train on that. Put that together tomorrow.
But healthy conflict is how more options come out, which lead to better decisions, right? That's that's the root of having a diverse workforce. So whether it's a political diversity or a gender diversity, right? It doesn't matter. I don't want everyone to think and look the same. I want people to come with different viewpoints, different perspectives, different life experiences, and then be able to say, look, this is how I see it. Because if one person sees it that way, chances are one of my customers probably sees it that way. Chances are one of my, partners or vendors or providers see it that way. And so I can't just assume that because I have one viewpoint, everyone thinks and feels the same way I do. And I want us to get united. I don't need us to get united. I need us to be respectful of our different opinions and bring really great different perspectives forward in a healthy way so we can make better decisions that help our business. And again, it's about keeping the business afloat and keeping the business moving forward. and keeping us innovative and keeping us, at the forefront of our customers' minds as a place they want to continue to work with. And that's what comes from having a diverse workforce. And whether it's your political diverse, differences, or your gender differences, or, growing up in a single parent home versus, a 2-family home, or a home with 2 parents who happen to be the same gender, like whatever it is, our perspectives are all different. And so again, you have to make sure that you provide a space where your team members feel that they can speak openly, that they won't be turned away for having an opinion, that opinions matter, and that they help us get to better decisions. There is always a right time and place for every topic, though. So anybody who's a parent knows how to say like not now, wrong time, or wrong tone.
I was talking to a couple of leaders at HR Transform this year, which, by the way, their panels are really good.
Mm-hmm.
They're always looking for good thought leadership in the space, right? That isn't trying to sell me something. And I think they did a good job with that. But I was sitting with a group of leaders, and that topic came up about emotional intelligence. And in my view, this was a psych major 100 years ago, longer than you, Lorna. And I love filters for that reason. But emotional intelligence, kind of, if you use that as your foundation, because we don't come into this world understanding everything that's happening, right? And everybody comes in at a different capabilities level emotionally and where they are. But I think as organizations, if we say we want to promote an emotionally intelligent atmosphere where we talk the same. I know I've been a proponent of Covey forever. And in people science, we talk about win-wins. So conflicts for us, we deal with the win-win side, where when you come on board, it's part of your onboarding to understand. We do a process that we named called up, down, up, sideways. We look for win-win. So I think having a language that makes sense for everybody, because really, if everybody's working in an organization, that is the first thing that they have in common. That is their bond. It's right there. And again, that's where the opportunity starts. It's starting here. Now, we have all agreed. In fact, our employee handbook says we agree. It's not, this is what we do. We agree. Because you're coming on board, you're going to agree. We're going to agree to, these are the things we all agree on. And you can challenge that agreement, right? But laying the foundation and then having a way to connect all the dots.
I think one of the things that's been really interesting to me as we continue to explore company culture and the word culture and what that means to everybody, it's not new. I think that years ago we referred to them as our principles, or our, it's an agreed upon way in which we work. It's agreed upon way in which we share our day with each other. And so a country will have a culture, a town will have a culture, a company should have a culture. And so there's 2 different ways of looking at it. It's that people say, oh, what's your culture? Like, are you, do you, earlier in this conversation, we said, like, does your leadership support this and talk about this? Like, that's not a culture. That's not the definition of culture. The culture is the agreed upon shared way in which we operate on a day-to-day basis. Our shared values, our shared experience, and what we're going to do. And part of that, you're absolutely right, Christine, is the language we use. And so if you leave it open, that's where miscommunications happen. That's where you have breakdown. That's where, there's missteps or missed opportunities. And that's where you get unhealthy conflict, is that we're not using the same language. But when a company has built up frameworks and tools and libraries and, even the crazy acronym dictionary that a lot of companies keep on their intranet, because what does that even mean here? It's important that everyone's coming to it with the great equalizer of, this is the shared that we have together. And we all have the same access to information, the same tools, the same communication information, and then we can go from there. And then you have local experiences. So your experience is not necessarily your culture, right? Your culture is a very different format.
I love that, Danielle. At Culture Playbook Partners, we say that culture are the conditions that are allowed to live or not live in an organization.
So
and
great.
Silence is not great. And I've been in those organizations where a chief executive will choose to not say something.
Mhm.
And I think, if I'm distilling this, today really comes down to comms and effective, good, strong communications at an organization, and how we're able to tell those stories and influence to make sure that the right communications are going out at the right time is kind of one of the best skills for any HR leader and anyone who's aspiring to be an HR leader.
That's everything.
Yeah.
That
And
is,
again,
it is
yeah.
everything.
And
It's such an
again, keeping
exciting.
those comms fact-based. Again, unless you are a company who is willing to put it all out there, in the example Lorna gave, where they were very much like, these are our political views, these are our social views, that's one way. But if you want to stay fact-based, and I don't mean to say like be so hard driven that you only provide the facts, but it's education based, right? When you provide a communication, it's to educate, it's to make sure people get the information they need and that they have it in a way that they can understand it and absorb it for how they need to use it. The other thing about communications, which again, I know we're supposed to be, that we've gone off on just comms, but I think that is the answer to the question about this discussion today, was how do you manage through turbulent times. Comms is clearly one of the top answers. Don't let it be lost that everyone likes to get an email. That's not comms, right? People learn differently. We have auditory learners. We have people who receive information in very different ways. So making sure that when you do have a communication, one, you don't just say it once, right? What do we say? Like, gotta say it 7 times before someone actually like hears it and gets it and absorbs it. Where do you put it? What mediums do you use? Are you making a video that goes along with the deck? Are you saying it in the all hands? Are you then reiterating it in an email? Are you putting it up on the Slack with the ability to interact with it? Are you talking about it then later in a team meeting as just a reminder? People need to see and hear the same thing over and over again, for it to take place. And so,
And
I just don't want
that's
to
a
be lost.
large challenge with any message, right? We're all
Right.
being bombarded by so many different things. Yet it's really crucial. And that's why I think picking one form of language and really getting behind it,
Mhm.
insisting that it's used over and over again to get the messaging through, getting the buy-in when they start and explaining it to them through the orientation process, having the hiring manager support it, not let anyone, negate it. I mean, we actually, we have a policy here where if you come out of line with this, then you get like 2 shots and then you can't work here anymore. I mean, it's pretty significant, but it's been very effective for us. I think that there's certain organizations, if you work for Planned Parenthood, you pretty much know how they feel about Roe, right? If you work for My Pillow, you pretty much know what's going on politically, right? You just do. So I think there are these like identifiers out there, and certainly, regionally there are as well. Again, I just think we're sitting on so many opportunities that and do our leaders really understand the importance of their words and what they think and the impact that they can have, that business can have right now? That's a huge concern. I mean, and if you ask me what keeps me up at night, it's that look at how many people, I mean, if we've discovered nothing out of the last, I'm going to say 14 years of elections, people are looking for leadership and they're coming out and saying, I want leadership. Don't tell me what to do, right? Don't spank me. Although some people actually do seem to like more of an iron fist. But it really is about trying to understand the kind of power that people are looking for. They're looking for it from somewhere. Or I see you have something to say in the chat.
Yeah. It's a fine line, Christine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we're up on time. I love these conversations. So
I just want to say one thing just to kind of bring it back to where we started, and hopefully give everyone on the call a little something to take away and think about on top of all of this, obviously. But I spend a lot of time talking with business leaders about their strategy and execution. None of that stuff happens without people, right? We are doubling down on helping executives increase employee productivity in order to increase financial performance. And one of the biggest things that happens is things that happen externally that they cannot control, right? And that's what we're talking about today. And what I would leave everyone with is this idea of there are 4 things that you should be focused on. One is you have to have a clean, clear strategy. People need to understand where you're going so that they come with you when times get tough. You have to really be very, very agile in your organization. I don't mean that in the tech term. Just have agility, know when to pivot, know when to take a pause and to make these hard choices around what you're going to talk to folks about. You have to have real thick trust in your organization. And I don't like transparent comms. I like clear comms, right? No one needs to know how the sausage is made. In fact, that can actually spin your employees out, but you need to be clear on what you're saying and why you're saying it. And then lastly, you have to prioritize employee well-being. That's really important. Like, human companies are the best companies. And so if you have, again, there's no playbook for anything, but if you have some truths along the way to help you to influence your leaders, I would say to you, use these 4.
Well said. Danielle, last words.
Yeah. My last words are, there's always a crisis going on, right? Whether it's a global crisis or a personal crisis, right? You're never out of a crisis. There's always something going on. And so don't think that quiet times mean that everyone is okay. There are definitely personal crises happening, and people continually need the support, even when it seems like things are quiet. I would say my second thing for those listening is prepare, and then prepare to pivot. You can have the best laid business continuity plan and then say, it doesn't work in this situation. We now need something different. And it's a resource, not a guide, your playbook. Make sure you have it there as a resource, but you're able to throw it out and really pivot as to the situation at hand. And then finally, just that over communicate and saying things in multiple ways, in multiple forms, in multiple mediums, so that your team members are able to get it in the best way that they're able to absorb it is just so important. Those are my 3.
Jess, last words.
Well, to me, I think as much thought and energy as we put into managing our employees, it's really important to put that same thought into how we're acquiring talent during these challenging times. Making sure that your authenticity is leveraged through your employer branding. So being able to highlight stability within your organization, communicate your values and culture. So share your stories and testimonials from your employees, how your organization has supported them. And then just most importantly, be authentic, be open about the challenges and how your company is navigating them with your candidates. Transparency, communication builds trust. There's nothing worse than an employee starting your company and things aren't what they thought they were going to be in the beginning. So just be authentic and be true.
That's why people leave, right? It's not what they thought it would be.
Yeah.
Well said. And then I think the point that I would like to hit home is, first off, understand the importance of the role that you play and the role that business plays today with we have 2 major wars. We're looking at a big election coming up. We've got so much diversity coming out. We've got AI in the work. To Danielle's point, there's no lack of crisis. Create a plan now, practice and execute the plan, and trust yourself and the plan when the time comes. Having been in a building with an active shooter, having a lot of training really teaches you what you need to know when you get there. So trust the plan. Of course, pivot, like you said, pivot as you need to do, but trust the plan while you're there. I'd like to thank you all for being in. I love you guys. It's always a great conversation, great meeting of the minds. I love our work. Thank you, everybody, for attending who's been on. We'll send a copy out. Jess, anything to clean up?
No, you all receive an email with a link to the webinar and any additional information we have. As always, let us know your thoughts and feedback. If there's any certain topics you'd like us to talk about, we'd be happy to address those. So,
Absolutely. Tell us what you're thinking and tell us what you'd like to hear about, because we'll be sure to share it. See you next month at the end of July. We'll be sending out a flyer soon with our announcement. Thank you, everybody.
bye-bye.
Bye, all. Thanks.
Right there.